As we reach the halfway point of the Major League season, the college season comes to a thrilling close. It's been an exciting week in baseball, unless you're a Met fan. As we reach the halfway point, the All-Star game comes closer, the trading deadline looms. It's This Week in Baseball. So Oklahoma, after UNC making it a spirited affair, getting it all the way to the final game, just destroys them 13-2 in the winner-take-all final game of the College World Series. As congratulations to Oklahoma, they are this year's champions.
And we're going to see, and that's true. North Carolina, which knocked out my alma mater, USC, in the final game of the super regional. I guess I was half rooting for them to go all the way, and that's what they couldn't get it done. They have won before, but it's a real merry-go-round now in college baseball in terms of different teams winning every year, and what's happening right now in the first, and let's talk about this for a second, just the owners came out with their proposal, and basically college is going to be affected by what the owners ended up proposing, which I think is one of the more interesting things about.
Yes, the changing how the draft works would be a very big impact to college, because now if you're not an absolute top level prospect, you really want to go to college if they're going with this as a now.
Enter the leagues from the domestically before age 20, which basically there's no more Bryce Harper at age, no Juan Soto at age.
I'm not sure how that, like, I can't
International ones only go until 18. But it's going to put a premium on all these players to go into college because they're going to look. What are they getting in college now? They didn't used to be able to get in college before the last EBA. And so now these guys can get money. And so it really toasts my bagels that the owners, are basically using the colleges as their minor league development system, not having to pay $1 for it. It's so perfectly owner in MLB.
Well, I mean, let's be realistic here. The thing that the proposal the owners have put forth has exactly 0% chance of going in. So I think it's one of those situations, in some respects, kind of like the San Francisco Giants Pride Night. It's interesting how both of these are situations where they're bad looks for baseball, but for completely different reasons. Whereas this one with the MLB, this is just owners doing business. Like, yes, they're going to give an outlandish proposal, because I'm pretty sure whenever we see the first player proposal, it's also going to be completely insane, because that's how these things work, and they go back and forth. So let's not make a big outrage about them just like I don't think the owners put that forth seriously thinking they were going to get any of that.
It was just so out of there in terms of like what you're going to basically change, the players eligibility.
Let's put it this way. You think the owners want pro players not to be eligible at 19? They want 19-year-olds to be able to come up to the major leagues.
No more multi-year contracts for free agents beyond.
Right. If you're not signing with your team. If you're signing with your team, you can sign for a 6th year in their proposal.
There's no more Juan Soto 14-year deals. No more,
So question, do you think Steve Cohen and the Dodger ownership group was in the room when they drafted that? Do you think they were just like, hey, can you guys just go outside for a minute while we slip this provision in?
They were. Okay, well, that sorry about that if I was not on mic there. I was told by our fine producer that I was. Thank you for fixing that there. That the owners basically are looking for the Players Association to save them from themselves. This is what we're gonna limit everything so we can't spend the money, that we've been spending all along, because clearly we don't know how to stop ourselves from doing it, and this is the only way.
I don't think it's so much that they can't stop themselves from doing it, but rather, for the first time, we have a class divide in the ownership group.
That is true.
That suddenly now there are owners that have, and there are owners that do not.
There are owners that have and are willing.
Right.
Most of the owners have.
But
some of them have more.
When we talk about have, in comparison, the money that Steve Cohen has to spend on certain things in comparison to some of the ownership groups, they just simply don't. Like, some of these ownership groups, yes, they have hundreds of millions of dollars, but when it comes to, it's not like they have the ability to give out some of the contracts that these crazy teams do, which is why I can at least understand the idea that they're trying to put forward. door there. I don't think it'll go through because I don't think that's the right way to solve it. But I don't think that there is a way that you're going to solve it where everybody's going to go, yeah, that's the fair
No, yeah,
way.
and that's why there's going to be a labor stoppage. And if we're, I guess I'm saying if we're lucky, but I guess I'm hoping worst case scenario is it's March 12th and they finally work something out and they have an abbreviated spring training and they either miss no games or they miss a few games and then they play and everybody's unhappy with what ended up being negotiated at
Right,
the
that'll
end.
probably be like we'll agree to something just so that we can play because the worst thing for both parties is that you just don't play a portion of next season.
But that offer, if you want to call it that, from the owners, it was just such a throwdown to say, look, we know you guys aren't going to accept this at all in any way.
I think
But let's really go crazy.
the thing that's concerning is they gave a proposal that is so far from anything being accepted. It's just like, okay, how far are we gonna have to go to actually get something that both sides would consider workable?
Yeah, yeah. So, and that, actually, that is my story of the week because what I was most concerned about was like, okay, were they going to throw out there something that's going to plausible that no, we don't.
They were never.
We don't want to work anything out.
If you slew out something plausible, that's the best thing that could happen for the players because they could still be obstinate and then get something that's even more crazy for them.
And I don't know, in a backwards way, I'll put it that way. I think they have united the Players Association more strongly than they might have been before
and maybe
this.
that was the smart move by them because now at least the player organization understands what they're trying to negotiate for. Because I do, not that I want to take the owner's side in this, but I do kind of understand where the owners are like, okay, wait a second, you guys are kind of arguing out of both sides here. You want completely unlimited contracts at the top end, but then you also want constantly increasing contracts on the bottom end with guaranteed money and guaranteed years for everybody. It's like, okay, well, wait a second. We can't have it both ways.
Well, and I guess it's just that the only sport that doesn't have any kind of a salary cap is baseball, which is something that players hold dearly to, and it shouldn't be held because of tradition necessarily. That's not the reason. It's just until you give the players a better deal than what they think they're getting by having complete and utter availability to make as much as one, they're not going to come. So you got to come a long way in the owner's side in terms of revenue sharing and things that's going to make the players listen. And I don't think the owners will ever give them that.
No.
So that's why this is going to go on for a long time. So yeah, sad that it's going to be that way. And now we can really see what the future holds.
And as we've continued to move through this season, it's been an exciting run here. We've started to see we had Dansby Swanson of the Cubs drove in 15 runs in a series against the Mets.
In 3 games against the Mets, he drove in 15 runs.
Right.
That is pretty unusual for a guy to do that. For a guy, by the way, who going into the series was hitting 198.
Right, he needed that, and obviously that series in part led to our first managerial.
No, not the first, because the fired managers include Alex Cora.
Right. You forget Cora went so early.
He went early, and Rob Thompson and the Phillies and Don Mattingly, since he took over, they have played great and they are back in it.
Right, and now Andy Green takes over the Mets as Carlos Mendoza is the latest victim.
Yeah, and for the Mets, and I think it's something that you had to do something. I think everybody understood, and I think people have put it. You can be a good guy like Mendoza and still deserve to be fired too.
Right. Carlos Mendoza, human, great guy. Carlos Mendoza, the baseball manager, not a lot of evidence that there's a lot of greatness there right now.
That the performance was of the team on the field is a reflection of the manager,
right.
As much as the roster and the coaching change. Look, the Mets didn't do any favors.
Probably the worst thing that I can say for Carlos Mendoza is that more so than the Mets were bad in his era of baseball, they were an unpleasant, unfun team to watch in his era of baseball.
And people stopped going to the ballpark to a degree.
I was thinking the Brody Van Wagenen era was less painful than this.
I don't know. That was pretty painful.
Right. This felt just was a truly uniquely unpleasant experience.
Waiting in the wings, and of course, when they hired Andy Green, being a Met fan, I thought, okay, that's what I expected, because I think we talked about this, that Carlos Beltran, who's in the Mets organization, who once very briefly had the Mets managerial job.
Shortest managerial job
pulled
ever.
It back right away. He is the guy that we think would be the next guy.
Pujols has Albert
Pujols throws his name in there. Like, I'd like to be Mets manager. And I'm like,
Albert Pujols? Like
Well,
that's
it's only because he's been trying to sniff around the Cardinal job
well,
now for a little bit,
I don't
and
think he
some
sniffs around. I just think he's a guy
he
that you would
wants
want
it.
to hire.
Well, he wants it, but somehow Ali Marmol just keeps surviving over
Yeah, I
there
kept thinking
somehow.
that's where he's going to end up, and it still may be. Although Ali Marmol's had a
But right now,
a
you can't
measure of
fire him.
success
Like
this
he's
year,
actually doing well.
with the Cardinals being there. So yeah, that would be very very interesting. So that'll happen after the season. And then one thing about Stearns, and we don't really talk about the Mets president of baseball operations. He has another year and a half on his contract. He's about a year and a half in, and I think that the good smart money was to say that he's not going to get fired, because if you fire him after a year and a half, who's going to want to come and work there to think that's all they're going to give you? So there's a really good chance in my mind that he's going to be there at least the 3 years of his contract, and then if it doesn't work out, they'll let him go then. But he fulfilled it, and they can do that. But if they fire him before that, I think it makes it harder to bring in somebody who's going to go, well, once you guys don't like what's going on, you're going to kick my ass out the door.
At the same time, if they're still in last place next July, I think you could very easily show David Stearns the door. I don't think any GM would be like, "Oh man, no, he was just about to
Yeah,
start
but
turning it around."
Yes, you could do it, but that would be symbolic. more than
Right, it would be
anything else, 'cause you're not
symbolic
gonna
of like, holy crap, you can't stink that long.
The problem is in doing that is that your draft is now right. It's right. So if you fire a guy
Right.
before
You-
the draft, then you don't have anybody in
to
there
do it, and if
who's
you
leading
fire him
the
after the
organization.
draft, you've got a guy that just did a draft for you that's no longer with the
Exactly.
team.
So it makes it awkward, either way.
And
So.
at a certain point, and I think a lot of times fans don't want a guy fired; they want their pound of flesh.
Yeah, right.
They want to see somebody excoriated for the sins of their team being bad, and so the manager, okay, well, we fired Mendoza. All right, the team still thinks, well, we can't get rid of all the players, so yeah, I guess David Stearns, you're next up.
That's why you fire the manager because you can't get rid of all the players. The Mets are going to get rid of some players. Above them in the division, all the teams have a positive run differential, and all of them are. I mean, and I include all of them in that. The Marlins and the Nationals, and they've played well this year. They've come a long way. The Nationals are a dynamic offense. They can't stop a cold when it comes to
But they can score.
relief pitching, and the Phillies did something to them last week. So in 3 games in a row, the Phillies hit home runs in the 9th inning to come back from a deficit to win the game. So that's like the first time that's happened in the major leagues in I don't even know however many years.
And there's also, I think, really the story we haven't mentioned yet is that there's a very good chance it is June 28th as we record this. July is a few days away. Were you going to be guessing that the Chicago White Sox could be in first place
Still.
in July?
Still, and they have a positive run differential now.
They're the only team in their
in
division.
their division that do that. And the American League only has 5 teams, and one of those is just barely, and that would be the Mariners, who just barely have scored more runs than they've given up. And so the American League's having a soft season, and the Guardians just had a nice series against I think the Yankees. They played well against. The Yankees are on a bit of a skid right now, but the White Sox took over first place from the Guardians, and it's still hard for any of us to believe that they're going to be there at the end. But the more the Guardians kind of scuffle around and the rest of the teams look, Kansas City, Minnesota, for sure. Not looking Detroit, who knows what's going to happen with them. There's a lot of meh in the American League, as we've talked about before.
There's a lot of Met in baseball right now. Baseball feels very top heavy this season, really outside of the couple of the top teams at the divisions like the Dodgers and the Braves. It really feels like there's just a lot of mediocrity everywhere else right now.
And the Yankees they had a nice tight little 3-game lead they had built on the Rays, who were struggling a little bit, and all of a sudden the Yankees lose 3 in a row now to the Red Sox going into Sunday night, and the Rays win 5 in a row, and the Rays are in first place, and the Yankees are looking up at them at this point. And the Yankees are injured. Grisham's coming back from the IL. I keep calling it the DL. Old habits die hard there. And they're also going to get back Ryan McMahon for what that's worth. They're not going to get back Aaron Judge until August, it looks like, at this point. He's still injured, but the Yankees will be fine. They've got enough
The best thing
pitching.
for the Yankees is that there's nobody else in the American League that looks absolutely amazing. So if you're the Yankees, you're just like, okay, you know what? Kind of like last year, except unlike last year, we're going to get Judge back instead of not getting Cole back.
And I think they got to believe we'll catch the Rays in the end. If
you're the Yankees, you're just like the Yankees, and we're seeing here with the Mets, because it's played a part of it on top of them being bad, is injuries are just such a big part of your baseball season. And if you're the Yankees, you're just like, all we got to do is survive until Aaron Judge is back, and then we're the team we're supposed to be.
I saw today that the first place team of the Tampa Bay Rays, and then they have a nice positive run differential. I didn't realize how good, you think Yandy Diaz is there, he's an average hitter, high average hitter, really good player and all that. And I knew Junior Caminero was having a good year.
I don't think you realize how good
I
he
didn't
is.
realize how good the year was. The guy's got 7 home runs in his last 6 games here as we
right.
Sunday.
But better thing, he's hitting 292 with 20 homers, 22 homers.
22. So he hit his 22nd. So he hit 2 today. Oh, no, he did 1 today.
Right. He's got a 932 OPS, but let's not sell Yandy Diaz short because the guy's hitting 336 with 12 home runs himself with a 931 OPS. You're going to tell me that guy's going to probably hit 330 this year with 25 homers? That's a pretty good season.
And you wonder why the Rays are doing so with a mystery? That's not a mystery.
Well,
those guys can play.
Yeah, right. And see, Cedric Mullins is actually, he's hitting 207. He's got 8 homers for them in the outfield, more than he had for the Mets.
I don't think you want to go there. But and as the rest of the American League East scuffles, I would, the Blue Jays were going along okay, and then they drop 5 straight and go 5 games under, and you wonder what's going to happen there at this point.
The Blue Jays look like a team that was a young team that won on they had a injury-ish free year last year.
Good.
But they looked great last year. And then this year is just the year where everything goes. Last year was the year with lots of things went right. And this is the year where lots of things have gone wrong. Because for the most part, outside of Vladdy underperforming, people are generally, when they're playing, are kind of doing what they're supposed to do.
They didn't get much from, they got nothing from Anthony Santander.
Yeah.
They made that move last year, and he didn't really contribute. Ernie Clement is the starting second baseman in the American League, so he's certainly been doing well. And their players, like you said, are still good. I don't know what's wrong there at this point, but it makes me think about the Blue Jays going at what point, and maybe because the American League is soft, it's going to make people delay the old, are we buyers or are we sellers, as we get to the trade deadline, which is not until August 3rd, by the way. And so, and you got to have something that people want to get from you also. If you're a seller, you got to have something sellable.
Right. And you also have to think about the timeline on which you're selling on. Because if you're the Blue Jays, you're a team that is trying to compete, presumably, next season. So trading away players for prospects doesn't make any sense because you're like, okay, cool. Well, we just sold high on, say, an Ernie Clement for some reason. Do we have a second base to replace him next year when
That's
we're trying?
Consideration.
Right. So,
and you're not going to sell a young guy like that. You're going to try to sell somebody who's got a salary that you like to move so you can get other players going.
But
really, you may not have that player.
Right. Like, what, you're going to get a lot from Max Scherzer at the deadline,
or Santander, who doesn't play and gets paid a lot of money.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Like, unfortunately, the flip side is in major leagues, because you don't have a salary cap, you can't salary dump guys. Trading away Santander's terrible contract has no impact because nobody wants to have an expiring contract on their books.
And I think the Orioles are in the same boat as are the Blue Jays at this point, and the Red Sox, I think, were sellers more than they were anything else before, but now they won a couple games. Oh, we're not that far out. You never know. You make a little run. So I think all that means with the trade deadline as late as August 3rd, we're still not sure. And again, you better have something that you actually think somebody else wants before you think you're going to be able to sell something.
Right. And you have to know what you're trying to get back here, because just selling for selling's sake doesn't. If you're the Mets, you have to know what you're.
Well, the Mets are going to sell for sell's sake.
Mets are going to sell for sell's sake because they have to. Right.
We don't want these guys around. It's not working.
Right. We've had this discussion many times where we go, okay, we like the outfield.
That's it.
Everybody else, we could get rid of.
Lindor is our shortstop. Other than that,
right. And Lindor is our shortstop, and I'm saying this lovingly, as much because we kind of have to have him be our shortstop as anything else. You don't.
Poor guy gets hurt, and now we're ready to throw him on a scrap heap. He had 2 fantastic years in a row. Come on.
Right. Well, what was happening at the first, couple weeks of this season? What that April look like? You want that to be your starting shortstop?
Yeah, it was bad. And we had the hand injury, so we got to give him a little bit there. Maybe it was harder to come back from that than we thought. Anyway, I don't worry about that guy being
but basically every other position.
But every other guy in the team, I'm not so sure about.
And I think it's just interesting looking at what feels like a talent, where the baseball is better than ever. There's so many good players in the major leagues. Why do we have so many teams that stink?
Yeah, particularly this year, it just seems like there are a lot of Met teams, and then another one is the Giants, and they can't get out of their own way, and they've got a manager who who seems like he is not really sure what to do, and he had the whole situation last week, which was all worked out with Devers when he tried to pinch run for Devers, and Devers wouldn't come out of the game and pushed away the guy that came to pinch run for him. Going, this is your star. You're paying him like $200 million, and oh, it's a misunderstanding.
Well, let's put it
this
way.
misunderstanding.
Didn't I say before the season I had questions about putting that kind of crew together there, being like, okay, you've got a rookie manager who's known for being weird and confrontational with one of the most mercurial players in baseball, with a young GM who kind of seems in over his head right now, based on right now, I'm sorry, Buster Posey, that was one of the worst PR statements I think I've ever seen.
Buster Posey is learning his way, as is Tony Vitello, and the Giants, should they trade Logan Webb? And by the way, Logan Webb's got a great show on MLB Network, Logan's Web, and he actually comes and talks about what it's like to pitch and what he's doing, what he's thinking. It's really, really worth listening to. He's a really sharp guy. I like him a lot. But he would be a trade candidate for a team like the Giants, who are certainly not going to make a run this year. Let me just finish on the Giants. But the Giants, since May 1st, I saw this. San Francisco has a .460 slugging percentage, which leads Major League Baseball.
They went from the worst offense in baseball to the best offense in baseball.
How does that happen? And how are they so bad if they've got a pitcher like Logan Webb and they've got the best offense in baseball since May 1st? And they only tied in runs, 10th in runs, even though they've got the highest slugging average. So they're obviously slugging okay, but not getting runs home at anywhere close to the same rate, because being in the top third is good, but it ain't like being number one.
Right, you got to think about it. This is a team that has had the best offense in baseball since May 1st, and they're 14 games under 500.
Yeah. But so what do you do with that? And you look at the leadership and go, there's something not right there.
Right, and it seems like more than ever, leadership and team overall direction is more important than ever in baseball. It's part of the reasons why you look at a team like the Dodgers and the Brewers and feel like they're successful, is because organizationally, from top to bottom, everybody in those teams knows what their mission is and knows what they're trying to accomplish. Whereas you look at a team like the Mets, and sometimes it feels like everybody on that team is pulling in 8 different directions.
Well, I don't want to get off here on a rant too much, but I think I had a short mention this to you where I thought, okay, so the Mets certainly used hope over experience to make their plan for this year, right? They hoped that Marcus Semien was going to be the player that he was, before.
Right,
we've talked
that
about Polanco was
yeah.
going to be the guy at first base and the other guy. And so the problem is the team that went back with the tried and true stuff, we went, well, the Yankees are running it back. How can they do that? The Phillies are running it back. You know what? Running it back.
The Braves
out this year
are running it back, and running it back.
The experience of knowing what guys can do is better than saying, "Well, the best Brett Beatty that we ever had, or the best Mark Vientos we ever had."
The difference there with the Mets was we weren't looking for the best Brett Beatty we've ever had. We were looking for a version of Brett Beatty
we had
never seen. We were looking for a version of Mark Vientos we had never seen,
and we're still looking for Alvarez to be the guy
we've never seen. We were looking for full seasons out of guys that have never put full seasons together.
And like Bill Parcells used to say, you are what your record says you are.
It's the same thing. You don't go off a whole full about tangent thing. It's the same thing with Ronnie Mauricio. I think people love the idea of Ronnie Mauricio. When I watch the baseball player Ronnie Mauricio, all I can think is, why do we not have somebody else that is not him?
And the Mets aren't. Look, not every team can go up and down their roster and go, "Oh, this guy was supposed to be the guy," and all that.
But they were counting on so many people to have years that they had not had either ever or in literal years. So it's like, can you really expect that? Can you really expect Marcus Semien to show
Clearly,
up
no,
and roll the clock back to Toronto Blue Jays time and suddenly be a completely different player?
So meanwhile, we talked about the class teams. You mentioned the Dodgers and the Brewers and the Braves, obviously, and I put the Phillies there too. They've
solid. Risen up to that level
solid.
now.
They've been playing such great baseball since Manley took over. But it's kind of nice still to see the Pirates and are scuffling in it. They're not.
Why is it nice to see them doing badly?
They haven't fallen back. They've hung around. The Cubs, I don't know what the Cubs are going to do. That team kind of puzzles me at this point. But even the Reds have kind of they've had a little bit of a skid lately. But the Cardinals are fading a little bit. But all that division is a fun division because you've got 5 teams that are, 2 of them that are really good, or one of them at least, and the other teams are like they could beat the hell out of each other any given day.
Right. It's the Brewers sort of have separated themselves in that division, and it'll be interesting to see which team of the other
Yeah,
four.
do they get a wild card out of the other 4 teams in that division?
I think they
Can
will.
they get a good enough record to be one of the 3?
I think there's a good chance they will, purely because it's not like there's not 2.
There's only 2. If you say the Phillies have the 1,
There's not like there's another team besides the Phillies that are playing really well right now.
well, and then go to the West, and and you've got the Dodgers, and then you've got the Padres.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
So are
Is that
anybody going to? They're in the same. You're saying they're in the same boat, though. You have the Giants and the Rockies in that division too, as opposed to having 4 teams in the Central.
right.
Are
But
more
I'm
representative.
more just saying that the Central teams are just in that second and third wild card fight, assuming that the Philadelphia Phillies don't come back down to earth, that the Marlins and the Nationals and then the Padres and the Diamondbacks are all in. So it's going to be an exciting, race for the wild card, unless one of those teams in that second wild card group suddenly just goes on a crazy hot streak, and all that does is make the race for the third wild card spot really exciting. That
still have got half a season, so that's why all those teams we talked about in the NL Central, they still have a chance to do something.
Right.
There are a few teams, and I would include the Mets in those, are like, yeah, no, it's
The Mets are done. right. And of those teams,
Giants are done.
a couple of those teams are somebody's going to go on a terrible 10-game streak. All of a sudden, they're going to go 2-8, and they're just going to be gone. And that's going to happen.
At the expense, though, the other team will do it at the expense of them too. So they'll benefit.
Right, there'll be some team that play, like the Pirates will play the Reds, and in 2 or 3 series really close together. The Pirates will go 6-1. The Reds are buried, and the Pirates are now flying high.
Okay, so quick fire question for you: Skubal going to get traded before the trading deadline?
Will he get traded? No.
He'll be a Tiger after the trading deadline.
He'll be a Tiger after the trading deadline because with him being hurt, it's going to be too weak. Teams aren't going to want to give up resources for a guy that is hurt, who they also aren't going to be sure they can re-sign. That's
they have to sign, right?
That's too many levels.
Not necessarily, and I don't want to get too deep into this. You don't think that necessarily means the Tigers are going to sign him? They'll just not trade him,
right? They're just not trade him, more so because they're not going to want to send him away you're not going to want to send him away because then he's definitely not coming back, and maybe by not trading him, you are able to keep him then.
Okay, give me your 2 World Series teams right now.
Dodgers, Yankees.
Yeah, I'd say the same thing. I think it's pretty easy. The rematch in 2024. So,
right, and that mostly feels easy because of the AL side of the equation.
I agree. I think when push comes to shove in the playoffs and all that kind of stuff, the Yankees.
Unless Judge is out the rest of the year.
Yeah, I don't think that is not what I hear.
But that would immediately change. If Judge is out and he's not coming back, then all of a sudden, okay, American League's wide open.
And next week maybe we'll talk about the All-Star game. Although I saw the new home run derby rules and all that kind of stuff. I don't know. I'm just not that excited.
I don't care about any major sport All-Star game, but I did want to finish out with my story of the week, because I think this is the most interesting thing, because we always talk about how the best pitch in baseball, it's not the best fastball, it's not the best curveball, it's strike one.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you look at it, when a player comes up from 2025 to 2026, they tracked 2,888 and 640 plate appearances. When the count started off at 0-0, your weighted on base average at a 0-0 count was 323. So you actually had a pretty good chance of getting on right when you come up. Strike one drops to 274.
Okay.
So you see about a 50-point drop. Where the flip side is if you go to 1-0, it's 364.
Is that on base or is that
weighted on base?
It's weighted on base.
Right. But so the real best pitch though is not strike one. It's strike two. Because going to 0-2, your on base average, we weighted on base 207. So think about that. It's like a 70-point drop.
Unless you got a bunch of pitchers like the Mets who can't put people away too.
But right, you could see that. Basically, whereas if you go to 3-0, you get on base 560.
That wouldn't surprise anybody.
3-1, 486. 3-2, 381. 2-2. So this is the difference between a 2-2 ball and a 2-2 strike. 2-2, your chance of getting on base 273. 3-2.
That's the same as 0-1, by the way.
Right. 2-2 is the same as 0-1, but 3-2, 381. So the difference, as soon as you throw that third ball, is over 100 points of chance. The chance of the guy going on base goes up by 10% by throwing the third ball in a bat.
And when you see, hitters make strides, as a few of them have this year, normally it's their selectivity that gets better, and they're managing to not strike out as much as they did before. And all of a sudden, guys like Junior Caminero, their strikeouts drop down, and all this, their production goes up. So that's what you're trying to do, and you're probably making those decisions on those pitches, and you're making the most of those things. That's a good one. I like that. So. Okay, well, we've got. There was one more thing I wanted to mention. Oh, no, the only thing on this bunting. Okay, this year bunting is up. Okay, big a lot. That's what I thought. Okay, tell me what a story. It's not. So it's up from. It's 0.9
Bunts per game.
per plate appearance.
Okay.
Right.
No, there's no way there's
No,
0.9 back.
right.
I'm sorry. I can tell you right now, there is no way you're at 0.9
of all plate appearances.
Okay.
It's 0.9 in 2026. Last year it was 0.7. So that's a huge increase when you think about it on a percentage basis. There ain't that many bunts.
Right. You'd have to look at the number of actual bunts, but still, it's about 25% more bunts than it was last year, which I think is the teams. When we talked about it, when they first started shifting all those years ago, where it's like, why don't guys just like hit the ball into the shift? There's nobody within 30 feet of you. You just have to literally hit the ball over there, and it's a free hit.
And I would say all the time, it's not so easy.
Right. But we've been saying that with bunting, where it's like, oh, look at where the guys are playing. Just drop a bunt, and you're going to get on. I think teams are finally starting to be willing to be like, okay, yeah, why not give that a shot?
Well, I wonder, training wise, are they focusing on it because for so many years, it was so out of fashion to bunt that I imagine they weren't really working on that much.
Right.
And maybe at the minor league levels or in the developmental levels, they're getting these guys to do that because it's a useful skill. So, and there's 25% more than last year.